Greetings, everyone, and thank you for joining us. I'd like to welcome everybody who joined us from different parts of the world, different time zones. I'm Professor Tamer Çavuşgil from Georgia State University. Those of you who have joined us in our past webinars know that this is an ongoing series, international business topics. We have been since April 2020, with the onset of the pandemic, started these conversations with educators, business professionals, talking about research, as well as teaching, as well as practice of international business. And we do this as part of a consortium of CIBERs, Centers for International Business Education and Research. 9 other CIBERs are in this MSI consortium, which bring you these conversations. These webinars are recorded and made available to you on various platforms, certainly at Georgia State CIBER's website, as well as GSU-CIBER's platform on YouTube. So that's something you can share with your colleagues. If you have a chance to share them with your students, that would be welcome as well. There will be a short survey once we leave our conversation in about an hour with these 3 distinguished guests of mine today. There will be everybody who registered and is on with us will receive a short survey, just 5 questions. We appreciate your response to those as we read them, pay attention to them, and think about future topics and future guests on this webinar series. So look forward to those. So today's conversation is something very contemporary, very timely, supply chain management in the age of disruptions, let's call it, and the role of marketing in global supply chain management. I have 3 distinguished scholars with me today to talk about various aspects of this topic. Some of you joined us last week. We had a conversation on the same topic with the business executive. Now we're following up with 3 scholars and talking about both the technology, the disruptions, and developments in various regions of the world with respect to supply chain management and how practitioners are pivoting in the middle of various disruptions. So let me just get on with the introduction of our 3 distinguished guests, and I will keep this short because they're all very well known to the IB community, international marketing community. We have with us 3 speakers, as I said, who joined us from around the world, 3 different time zones, 3 different continents. And I appreciate, especially, I guess, Brian, it's very, very late for you in the evening. So thank you for your time. But first, Professor Ayşegül Özsomer Tunalı. Thank you, Ayşegül, joining us from Koç University in Istanbul today. And I understand you're just slightly outside of Istanbul in a nice little town. We can maybe talk about that later. But I think most people who tuned in knows that Ayşegül is a leading authority in global marketing and branding, particularly in the context of emerging markets. Ayşegül serves as a professor of marketing at Koç University and holds a PhD from Michigan State University. Her work has been widely published, including in the Journal of Marketing. And Ayşegül, of course, just started her term as editor-in-chief of the Journal of International Marketing. That's a wonderful recognition to her status in the discipline. And Ayşegül is also the co-author of a very important book, The New Emerging Market Multinationals, a book recognized for its strategic insights and practical relevance. So thanks again, Ayşegül, for being here with us. And then we have Dr. Daikwan Kim. Daikwan is Spencer Fehili, MBA professor at Florida State University, and his scholarship bridges international marketing and strategic business practices. And Daikwan also serves in various editorial roles as senior editor for International Business Review and associate editor for the Journal of International Marketing. And Daikwan was recently honored as a Fulbright University Vasa Scholar in 2024. I know, Daikwan, you had a great time in Vasa in Finland this past year. And thank you for for all you have done in terms of your research and education. And we have Professor Brian Jean with us. Brian is a distinguished professor in the Department of International Business at the National Taiwan University. He's also the Associate Dean of International Affairs and Director of the Global MBA program at the College of Management at National Taiwan University. And I know all of these scholars have published widely. You have read their work, and their bios should be on our website and appears in many places. So I will get on with our conversation here. Our intent today is to cover three different aspects of marketing's role in global supply chain management. We'll talk first about regional tensions and developments, and then we'll turn to technology and various environmental challenges that practitioners in global supply chain management face, as well as the opportunities for scholars in terms of research. And finally, we'll talk about location decisions of multinationals. And we'll keep this as a conversation among three of us, but everybody is invited to post their comments and questions in the Q&A or the chat. Please, as to the extent we have time, we will respond to your comments and questions. So maybe, Ayşegül, we'll start with you. And let's start with a reality check. Global supply chains have faced an onslaught of disruptions. We've seen trade wars, Brexit, the Russia-Ukraine war, and of course the lingering effects of the COVID-19. For some time, we've been hearing about companies and supply chain moving from just in time to just in case. So there's a lot of developments there. So the question for you, I'd like to get us started. How are firms involved in international marketing responding to these geopolitical disruptions in terms of reconfiguring their supply chains and pivoting perhaps? And also, can you share some examples from especially outside of the United States?
Thank you, Tamer Hoca. It's a pleasure being here. Thank you for inviting me. Let me try to explain a little bit the type of reactions, responses, but also strategic responses we are seeing. I have a few examples from the UK because the UK case is also very interesting, not only the geopolitical disruptions and uncertainties, but also the special case of Brexit has given companies in the UK a little bit more time to think about reconfiguring their supply chains and responding first to Brexit, then to geopolitical tensions, and then COVID. And so they have done a little bit more. And with a group of scholars, we did some interviews with some companies, and we found out that in general, the desire for companies is to increase their control of the supply chain. What happened during COVID showed them that they actually had very little control on their supply chains when they were heavily dependent on sourcing from China. So normally lead times which were about 3 weeks ended up being 3 months. There were supply shortages. So a big motivation, kind of a middle to long-term motivation, is to increase their control by bringing in closer to home, home shoring or reshoring or near shoring, some of the manufacturing that used to be in Asia. And this also enables them to control uncertainty to some extent. When we talk to those companies, they usually have this as a strategic goal as part of the 5-year, 10-year plans of the company. Now, one interesting thing that they mention is uncertainties in the, for example, in the Red Sea, the Houthi disruptions of ships and risks of such have increased actually container prices. So I have an example here. Freight costs from Asia to UK before the Houthi disruptions of the Red Sea route was about 1,500 pounds per container, and it went up to 20,000 per container. So what we are hearing is that the cost advantages of manufacturing in Asia is not as high as it used to be when you add the uncertainty, lack of control, the longer lead times, and increases in freight costs. Another motivation is doing the right thing. Some companies want to differentiate, want to create differentiation by bringing manufacturing back to their homes, creating employment, and also doing the right thing. Politicians are talking about this, but also customers. So these are B2B companies. They want to do the right thing, and because their customers, their buyers are expecting them, especially ESG regulations and keeping up with expectations. I think Brian will talk more about that. That is becoming critical. We're also seeing more of that, bringing back particularly automated manufacturing lines that can be automated, that can be produced in high labor cost places, where the labor is replaced more and more with automation. And we are also seeing some AI, very creative AI usage. So to summarize, I can say that part of it is strategic, part of it is increasing the control of the supply chain, and part of it is doing the right thing and therefore being a favorable supplier for their customers.
Thank you, Ayşegül. Let's continue our discussion along those same lines. The disruptions, the shocks that hit global trade, and vulnerability that originates from those kinds of issues. So, Brian, I'd like to ask you. I mean, you come obviously from a nation, Taiwan, where you have great players in international supply chain, especially in electronics. So one feels that, well, perhaps they have now become more vulnerable with these shocks to global trade. But we read from the business literature that many of these firms are actually finding ways to thrive. So they're developing niche capabilities, upgrading quality, or they're leaning into agility. So what unique capabilities these successful suppliers from Taiwan or other emerging markets develop to stay resilient and competitive despite these global disruptions like tariff wars or pandemic and other types of disruptions.
Okay, Emma, thank you. Thank you for inviting me. It's my pleasure to be here to share some of my observation about the current trend about geopolitical issues, and then some of my observation and some of my experience for some of my research, also some of my my talk with some of the executive, particularly for some of the electronic suppliers in Taiwan. How do they deal with this external shock in terms of geopolitical change? How do they expect? I think they are in terms of capability and how do they deal with just follow schools and comments. I think it's one of the issues is their agility in productions. They're kind of very flexible manufacturing systems. For example, a lot of Taiwanese suppliers, such as Foxconn and also other electronic suppliers, because in order to serve those key accounts, global accounts around the world, and for example, most of them, they are from the US or from Europe, and they are due to the recent, for example, terrorist war, and also the geopolitical issues and those kind of uncertainty, they need to shift their location, production, manufacturing system from mainland China, for example, to a lot of Southeast Asia, like Thailand and Indonesia or India, a lot of Southeast emerging markets. I think so. I think one of the key capability they did is kind of agility, and also we can say they are kind of new emergent capability called geopolitical navigations. Kind of capability, they may be able to diversify their customer base, also in order to reduce country risk or to focus on simple countries. There are a lot of Taiwanese suppliers has been deal with that. And also, for example, yesterday I was talking to one of my executive students. He is a major supplier for Huawei or for some of the other Chinese smartphone manufacturers. And they have a huge manufacturing system and factories in China. And also, they also deal with some of the customers in Americas, right? And so some of the Americans know they are dealing with Huawei, which are Chinese suppliers. So basically, they are trying to convince them, saying that nowadays, due to the geopolitical issue, you should try to avoid to be a contract manufacturer to Chinese customers, which you are dealing with, and which make them to be kind of in a very embarrassing and kind of decision making. How can that try to sacrifice some of their key customers, particularly from mainland China, in order to make those American customers happy? It's a sacrifice. How can they try to, in order to diversify their customer base, how could they do? Should they do that? And when should they do that? They are in a kind of decision-making challenge currently they are dealing with. Or they are even thinking about hiding. For example, hiding American customers saying that we are still dealing with Huawei, but we don't let you know in terms of that kind of relationship. So it's kind of a weird. I mean, for some of the contract manufacturing here in Asia Pacific country, particularly though their manufacturing factories and used to be in China. Okay, that's some of my observation. Yeah.
Yeah. It's
Can I jump
interesting
on
that,
and
Brian.
make
Yeah, please,
some
Taekwon,
comments
go
and
ahead.
then share my observations? Brian and I had a study on the impact of a pandemic on firms' product diversification and market diversifications a few years ago. And according to the study, with this kind of external shocks, they become much more innovative. They came up with radical ideas to enter into different segments and different markets. Otherwise, they probably not going to even think of. But with the pandemics and external shocks, they came up with a very radical ideas and product ideas. So I thought it's very interesting and counterintuitive that they become more innovative with the external shocks. Okay, I will stop there.
Yeah, very good, very good, Daikwan. Thank you. So, continuing this interesting discussion, I read recently in Wall Street Journal an interesting article about China, the EU, and the US redrawing the global supply chain map. So they call this the new arms race in technological supremacy. So from AI chips bans to 5G battles, I mean, there's this technological standoff between these regions, these three regions. So in this emerging climate of these regional technological hegemony, what should international marketing managers be paying attention to?
Well, thank you for the question and thank you for your invitations. I'm honored on this panels. With that said, that's very timely questions, and we are in the middle of very interesting time period. And as we know, Industry 3.0 or information technology had changed our life, daily life, quite radically for consumers as well as for businesses. And such technologies help businesses and supply chain members stay integrated so that they can they can have a more orchestrated voice in the market. So there has been a lot of changes that information technology brought up. However, these days it becomes quite different environment for supply chain partners. Given the challenges from these regional tensions and tariff wars and things like that, especially over technologies, firms and managers should pay attention to their supply chain resilience by thinking about how to diversify as much as they can in terms of suppliers and in terms of regions they have a relationship with. And then they have to also think about the flexibilities. How can they build a flexible production environment and market environment so that they can overcome these kind of uncertainties from government and then some entities out of their control. So supply chain resilience is definitely things they have to pay attention to in the futures. And then at the same time, it's always great to think about technological leadership, or in other words, more innovations. As I briefly mentioned after Brian, companies tend to be more innovative and come up with more radical ideas with external shocks like this. And having technological leadership will definitely help them have more partners and more supply chain members relying on them rather than the other way around. So coming up with a technological leadership is definitely things for them to think about. And then adaptation, but especially technological adaptations. Things become digitalized quite rapidly these days, and businesses and managers have to think about transformations into this digital world as much as they can to overcome these uncertainties. Of course, they have to also pay attention to intelligence across the world, making sure that they are aware of what's happening in other parts of the world, not only in their market, but also in other markets as well. And then if they can come up with some network of partnerships across the regions, that will help in case of external shocks, so that they can reshuffle the supply base from one region to another regions and so forth. So those would be a great ideas to overcome the uncertainties coming from this interesting time.
So we're talking here about really a portfolio of competitive strategies in the midst of these unprecedented developments in global trade and economy. And innovation and co-creation is something that I will speak also. I'll ask Brian, but Brian also, I'm thinking about the role of trust now. Uh, Trust in partnerships, you would think that becomes even more vital during crises. We know how long-term supplier relationships help firms like Toyota, for example. They were able to overcome the semiconductor shortage much better than their peers when difficult conditions arose. So the question for you, Brian, how come how can emerging market suppliers strengthen their relationships with their global buyers to enhance this trust element and also continuity with their existing suppliers during these disruptions, such as tariff wars and pandemics?
Yeah. I think following on Dequan's ideas, I think the key and to be trustworthy partners or suppliers for global buyers in the global supply chain, I think even becoming more and more important in the current volatile and dynamic geopolitical tension world. So I think to be responsive, to be agile, and also even under the conditions of geopolitical tension, try to keep promise on. And we talk about in the literature, we talk about different type of trust, right? We have capability trust and different type of trust. For example, in the capability trust, try to keep developing your supplier like manufacturing capabilities, try to keep your promise, like on-time deliveries, and also in terms of that's also one of the key advantage of like Asia Pacific supplier, which is good value for money, right? You offer good quality, but still relatively cost but although it is facing an increasing, I think, challenge given the intensive tariff war. I think the responsive and try to be agile and try to be keep your promise and also continue develop your capability in terms of manufacturing capability, and also increase your innovation, as Stay Conscious mentioned, innovative capabilities, trying to offer time to market and also good qualities product and service still play a key critical role in the current world, and we in terms of underpinning the trust relationship with in the whole global supply chains. That's my comment. Thank you.
Brian, I'd like to ask you also about co-creation and joint innovation, because we know that emerging market suppliers especially risk getting stuck in low margin roles, typically. But there's also an opportunity, isn't there? And especially through co-creation and joint innovation. I've seen stories in the media that describe suppliers in India, for example, and Southeast Asia. There are co-developing products with multinational companies to climb up the value chain. So how can these practices help suppliers move up the value chain?
Yeah, I think that's one of the key innovative capability for those of emerging market suppliers, as you mentioned, moving up the value chain to climb more value, to appropriate more profit from the whole pies of sharing with their global customers in the global value chain, which although is difficult, but particularly nowadays, given their high capability, high adaptive capabilities, very high responsiveness to the customer's demands, and also as one of the key issues is they invest more and more R&D investment, and also they can really solve those kind of issues. As I mentioned earlier, nowadays those kind of co-design and co-development really takes time, also take a lot of efforts. to develop those kind of innovative capabilities. But over the years, through the collaborations with the global buyers, they're learning by doing and also learning from the experience, and they do learn a lot from their global buyers. As one of the example, for example, Foxconn, one of the key Taiwanese suppliers for Apple, right? Over the years, they have already joined a lot of development projects with Apples through the different global teams. They work together. They jointly work on a lot of contractual-based projects like iPhones, like iMacs, and a lot of different product lines. So over time, they continuous innovative and keep developing their design and also manufacturing capabilities. I think they become one of their uniqueness. And also in terms of scales, they continuous invest a lot in the global productions. So more and more we talk about economy of scales, and also they become more and more competitive because they can really drive down their cost in terms of global productions.
Excellent. Thank you, Brian. Like one of our participants, Van would like to get the citation of the study that you mentioned. You may want to put that in the chat. But Ayşegül, let's turn to you a little bit and talk a little bit more about the role of marketing in particular in supply chain management and logistics. How do you, I mean, we know that this pace of change is accelerating. Firms need adaptive strategies, and that's really discussion everywhere to approach their complex supply chain arrangements. What marketing strategies, resources, capabilities come to mind that you think are essential for managing global supply chains, especially in today's geopolitical and technological changes?
Hocam, first let me, with your permission, if I may, add an example. Daikwan mentioned that during the crisis, he and Brian's research showed that firms became more innovative, particularly in their products, the way they, maybe they enter new product lines. I did a project during the crisis in Greece, and this was a prolonged crisis that started in 2008. And with a group of colleagues, we found the same thing. We found during the prolonged Greek crisis, those firms who survived and who grew, they were innovating, they were actually improving the quality of their products, which is very counterintuitive in a way, because the purchasing power of consumers of the markets were decreasing, but these companies were doing better by innovating, by introducing higher quality products, because consumers are making decisions more carefully. They are buying less and they are deliberating more. So I think we're going to see the same. We are already seeing the same thing now, that from a marketing perspective, all this talk about trade wars, tariffs, I mean, we already know that in the US, the tariffs are, I read about $3,900 additional expense by an average household due to tariffs are estimated by some groups. So already for some groups, the purchasing power is going to go down, which means they will deliberate more, they will think more, maybe they will buy less, but quality is going to be more important. At the same time, we are seeing a lot of discussion about supply shortages, at least in the short run, leading to empty shelves. So this may also create some consumer reaction and even more careful buying. So what we see two groups of customers. Some group become overly cautious. They think twice, they search a lot, quality and becomes more important and price becomes less important. Another group becomes a little bit more like live the moment, consume now, don't postpone purchases, buy now. I may not be able to buy it next year. I might as well buy what I can now. So I think it's going to be interesting how these two groups and different ways of thinking or responding to an uncertainty like this, it's going to change from country to country. But I think it's also going to be very interesting how large those two segments are and how companies can react to it. From a company perspective, following on Brian's point, I can highlight two mindsets. So this need to transform, but also be resilient. So transformation while being also resilient and adapting to differences, but at the same time, innovating and transforming necessitates a flexibility mindset and also a strategic partnership mindset. So, I mean, a common theme we are seeing is companies cannot do it alone. So they will need to more and more form strategic partnerships. Brian already gave the examples of Taiwanese suppliers partnering with different companies, innovating together, but viewing this as a long-term partnership strategy. So I can talk a little bit more about how companies are responding, but basically what we see in our research is resilient transformation, flexibility mindset, and strategic partnership mindset.
Interesting. Thank you. Thank you. Very interesting insights, Ayşegül. Naikwan, we talked about technologies, and you all have given examples of how technology is impacting supply chain, but there's also this other element, the so-called platform economy. Amazon, Alibaba platforms reshaping also logistics and marketing alike. So I remember reading an article where the platform economy is described as the new container ship of globalization. So in your mind, what are the impacts of and implications of these advanced technologies and platforms that for international marketing managers? Turn on your audio, please.
That's excellent questions, Tamara. Really, these days, things become more, group-based, meaning more ecosystems. So with technology-based platforms and then advanced technologies, especially advanced technologies, individual firms wouldn't be able to come up with solid technologies. Quite often, it is more about group-based or consortium-based. That means ecosystem development going to be something we're going to see quite frequently in the futures. That also means it's going to be more regional and global ecosystems rather than more country-specific or local ecosystems. And then such ecosystem means more standardizations, in my opinion. That means since it is a group-based or team-based or more consortium-based development, there got to be more standard to put in. Otherwise, there are going to be a lot of communications issues and some other issues arising without such standard. So with the collaborations and then in ecosystems, a company can become more efficient and then definitely more automated. They will rely on more automations, more efficient communications between partners, and eventually that lead to the supply chain itself becoming more visible and transparent in the market as well. So with a more obvious ecosystem-based technological development, we will see some efficiency in communications and automations in supply chain activities, improving visibilities and transparency. And that's what I see in this area.
Thank you, Daikwan. Brian, I'd like to shift the discussion a little bit to ethical considerations, which have become very, very important. We've seen reports of how failing ESG audits led to suppliers losing their relationships with their buyers, getting delisted across several sectors. And we're also related to that, this increased standards for traceability of what these suppliers are doing. So a couple of questions there, but they're related. How do these shifting buyer expectations about ESG responsibilities, right? Changing supplier selection and marketing positioning in the global supply chains, and then implications of these, when marketing managers, when buyers enforce their ESG audits and traceability standards throughout their supply chains, how do suppliers respond to that? What does your research show on these issues, ESG audits and traceability standards?
Thank you, Tamer. I think there's timely issues, and I think it become a more and more critical issues when particularly in the global supply chain, particularly for those of the suppliers located in emerging market. So they have to follow the ESG standard from their global buyers. For example, global buyer like Nike, Patagonia, they now set up a stricter labor, or even environmental requirement and practice for those of the suppliers. So in terms of partner selection process, they become more and more strict for those kind of global buyers. So how those emerging market suppliers, they can upgrade their ESG practice in terms of environment, social, and governance practice to meet the global standards, which become a more and more critical issues, which also related to how could they, as Dresser mentioned, upgrade their production capabilities, innovative capabilities, and also design capabilities to meet the global standards. For example, as I can observe, and also some of my research has been showing more and more suppliers, they are kind of pushed. In the beginning, they are pushed by their global suppliers to adopt those kind of innovative technologies, and also trying to upgrade their production process during their global supply chains. And over the times, learning by doing, it becoming more and more kind of autonomies, or even they're spontaneous to develop those kind of ESG standards. And so there's a transformation from a more passive approach to a more proactive approach for those suppliers that have been doing to develop the ESG practice. So over the years, and I think it become a critical issues also related to the technology developments. As Daquan just mentioned, I think the advance of manufacturing technologies such as Internet of Things, IoTs, and also the artificial intelligence, I think will enhance, also even increase the efficiency of their production process. I think they become more and more, as you mentioned, transparent on over and through the I think those kind of advanced technologies to help them to increase their automation capabilities, their forecasting capabilities, and also over time and ultimately enhance their efficiency and increase their, for example, environmental protection capabilities and in their global supply chains. I think that's my observations and some of my research has shown. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Brian. I figured, we cannot be talking about global supply chain management and not mention reshoring. And reshoring used to be a fringe idea, but not anymore. We've seen it now in, automobiles and semiconductors. Companies are bringing production closer to home, but then there are the ripple effects for marketers and supply chain management. So, what are the global, regional, local market implications of reshoring for, again, marketing and managing global supply chains? And related to that, I figured is the role of the people, quicker delivery, local job creation, sustainable sourcing. How do these changes like reshoring affect consumer well-being? A couple of related questions there.
Thank you, Tamer Hocam. In a recent research, what we are seeing is that the motivation behind reshoring from a company perspective, from a managerial perspective, is decreasing the volatility and the uncertainty. So that's the main goal. Now, that's, of course, an internal reason for the firm to be able to control the supply chain by bringing it closer to home is one goal. But there are also some additional benefits to it in terms of good citizenship or being perceived as a company who is creating local jobs. Some buyers in a B2B context are already favoring, given the political environment, which seems to be quite troubling, in fact, which makes us versus them more salient. What we are seeing is that some B2B customers are starting to favor some suppliers who have, at least not all, but at least have done some reshoring for some of the products and decrease the lead time. So we are seeing some preferential treatment in that. And this is not coming from the customer, but from the buyer. And some customers, there is some initial evidence that some customers in the UK, for example, in the US, there is some preference for products. For example, when a company, a UK manufacturer, puts the made in UK, they initially say that they do view some favoritism or positive consumer perceptions. So given the current climate, there is some country of origin, positive country of origin effects from the final consumer side, but also from the buyer in the non-final consumer side that we are seeing. Of course, this has to be not at the expense of quality, because we also mentioned that consumers are giving more emphasis to quality. The examples I'm talking about are more in the healthcare suppliers, healthcare instrument suppliers, etc., and also some electric components suppliers. So in those, there seems to be some benefits, initial benefits of reshoring, and not big disadvantages in terms of quality. The quality seems to be at par. And the additional control of the supply chain seems to give managers some flexibility and also some peace of mind, actually, in managing. However, these are not high-tech industries. These are more like, I would say, average technology innovation. Of course, in high-tech, still, it may not be as easy to reshore it, to bring it home. So we do see some of that. In terms of consumer goodwill, I think it's going to be dependent on, is reshoring going to be able to keep the price levels that consumers enjoyed in the past by sourcing from farther away, and also the quality, the price quality and variability. Are we going to be able to provide to the end customer all the choices at a good quality and good price? I think it's going to depend on what the reshoring companies can do and to what extent they can, solve this or train their labor forces. Initially, the examples we saw in the UK, they don't seem to be complaining too much about losing quality when they bring manufacturing back to their home countries.
It will be very interesting to see these reactions, these sentiments as a result of implications for consumers, maybe smaller choice and higher prices, and maybe scarcity of some products. How do they respond? I mean, definitely. Thank you, Ayşegül. Maybe we'll wrap up our discussion with this, Daikwan, the role of institutions. So with today's rapid policy shifts and unpredictability, geopolitical unpredictability, the old idea of stable environments is fading. I mean, so as somebody said, there are no forever friends in politics anymore. There's no more forever friends. So given this, how should international marketing managers think about institutional contexts and prepare their firms for a global presence in the future?
Thank you, Tamir, for the questions. We observe very interesting, geopolitical tensions these days, and that such tensions actually give international marketing managers a second thought about the role of an institution and institutional context. So with that in mind, I can't overemphasize the importance of institutional dynamics and their nature being changes constantly, even though we see much faster pace of changes, but it changes constantly. Therefore, such institutional context will make impact on their businesses. And we clearly see a huge impact on global trade between major powerhouses these days. So understanding the importance of our institutional dynamics is a starting point. And then they have to adapt their strategies and their market portfolios according to regional tensions. And I emphasize the importance of a network of partnerships and alliances, and that kind of thing will come into play for these as well. So adapting themselves to regional tensions. And then they have to take advantage of technologies. Technology will help in great deals, and news and intelligence are becoming part of our life pretty much real time. And then so such technology will also help us retool the manufacturing process and then retool our strategies quite overnight these days too. So we have to take advantage of what technology can offer. And then finally, I cannot overemphasize the importance of building strategic alliances across the regions so that they can stay tuned to the regional development and institutional changes across the globe.
Something we need to keep in mind for sure all the time. Maybe we have time to respond to one of the comments that was posted. Rajendra says, there seems to be an increasing trend for countries led by the USA for bilateral trade deals, even FTA, in this era of deglobalization. USA, Britain, US, India, soon, for example. How might these agreements impact global supply chains? So, in a sense, these blocks, regional blocks, or country bilateral or multilateral blocks, regional agreements, taken the place of truly interconnected global market economy. Any of you would like to comment on Rajendra's question? So people talk about decoupling. I mean, to some extent, that's taken place. We see, of course, these tensions arising, and then all of a sudden repercussions in terms of slower pace of trade. But when we looked at past disruptions, we didn't necessarily see a significant pace in global trade. I mean, especially in merchandise trade as well as service trade. So, but there are these undercurrents, right? I mean, these regional blocks. So, do you see, for example, USA, India collaborating, USA, Britain, India collaborating and creating these regional agreements? Daikwan, do you want to comment on that?
Well,
What would be for example, what would be the role of Korea, South Korea, in these times?
well, a lot of emerging markets, including South Korea, rely on major global market, and i.e. North American market and European market. And the tensions between those major powerhouses will definitely create uncertainties. So given uncertainties arising, what can international marketing manager can do? And then again, they have to assess to what extent it's going to be long-term or short-term in a sense.
Phenomenon.
So,
Yeah.
right, if it is a long-term, they have to come up with a different strategies and different reactions compared to short-term perspective they assess. And I guess it changes from industry to industry quite a bit these days. So their own assessment, and then based on the assessment, come up with reactions and strategies to overcome it. That's what they have to focus on in this uncertain era, I guess.
Yes. So unfortunately, our time is almost up, but I wanna give you a chance to talk a little bit about another exciting project that you're all working on, a special issue in the Journal of International Marketing on these topics that we've been covering today: marketing's role in the management of fast evolving global supply chains, which has a deadline of submissions, which is rapidly approaching here. But maybe Ayşegül, you can talk, or we can say a little bit more about the special issue that you are leading.
Sure. Together, the four of us as a team, we are in the process of organizing a special issue. So the call is out. The deadline is June 30th. However, it can be extended because it's such a interesting, timely topic. Any topic from an international marketing perspective, many of the issues we talked here If you have research on these issues, please submit it to us. As you know, JIM, Journal of International Marketing, is the premier AMA journal, which focuses in international marketing and international business issues. So we would very much look forward to submissions. And if you need extension, as I said, we would be more than willing to provide an extension, because we do want many papers and we want quality papers. And so we would love to receive papers. And the four of us, Tamer Hoca, Daikwan, Brian, and myself, will be the co-editors of the special issue. Now, we also have another special issue, which actually is very much related to what we talked today, digital platforms and ecosystems in international marketing. So, you know, again, a reality of our business environment. So any research on digital platforms and ecosystems with an international marketing business implication is welcome. And the deadline for that one is May 30th. But again, if you need extensions, I'm more than willing to give extensions as long as it will make the papers better. Please do submit.
Excellent. So open invitation there to scholars. Please think about these two special issues. Work on your papers and submit them. So I want to thank everybody who joined us today for this lively discussion on a very important contemporary topic with three outstanding scholars that I've come to know over the years. Thank you so much, Ayşegül, for joining us from Istanbul. Thank you, Daikwan, for joining us from Tallahassee, Florida. And thank you, Brian, for joining us from Taipei, Taiwan. So this, again, a reminder, the recording will be available in just a couple of days on our YouTube channel, as well as Georgia State Cyber website. And we look forward to seeing you at another webinar, Georgia State University Cyber webinar. So thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you to our outstanding panelists, and look forward to seeing you at another cyber seminar. Have a good rest of your day.